This series is called the 8 Business Imperatives, and each episode we're looking at a key strategic initiative that businesses are trying to achieve and understand some of the challenges around getting there. So please submit questions via the special Q&A box, which you've got at the bottom of your screen. You can type in your name if you wish to be identified. And as we go through, I'm sure lots of questions will occur to you. So we have a real treat for you today. I'm really excited. That's because the subject, driving innovation without borders, could not be more perfect for this person. So I'm absolutely delighted to have James Moore with us. James is the former general manager at Trainline, a company that I think everybody will know, an incredibly innovative company, joining us this morning. James, it's fantastic to have you with us. And this is a subject that I think is kind of made for you. Is that right?
Yeah, it's perfect. It's quite close to my heart. I've, throughout my career, both at Trainline and then prior businesses, Amazon, eBay, EA Games, Betfair, have had to sort of take on this challenge. Sometimes I've got it right. A number of times I've got it wrong, and it hasn't gone as well as it might have done. Maybe it's worth just acknowledging, like, first up, I was at Amazon, a good story of actually it not working. So I was at Amazon, where I ran Amazon's fledgling ticket sales business, so music tickets. And it was a great hypothesis that Amazon had, or particularly Amazon UK team had, that they could use their marketing machine and the knowledge of what people listen to and their Alexa devices, their music taste that people have, and combine those two to sell tickets to customers for concerts. We solved loads of problems around that process and built this pipeline so that when we went on sale with huge artists, like we went on sale with Ed Sheeran, we could allow customers to log in, buy a ticket, and check out within 4 minutes, whereas all the rest of the competition were putting people in virtual waiting rooms. And we built a lovely business in the UK. Unusually for Amazon businesses, this was a business that started in the UK, and then the plan was to scale that innovation across borders and around the world. And next stop, as you might imagine, was mandated by the Amazon leadership, was the US. If you're not in the US, you're not anywhere. And so we built this amazing business in the UK, and it was starting to really accelerate and grow. It was profitable. All of those things were great. And we thought, oh, this is going to be easy. Let's just take it to America, repeat the same model. We went over to the US, and partly our success in the UK had conditioned the market in the US, and Live Nation, which is a parent company to Ticketmaster in the US, and we found out had something of a monopoly of supply over there, and had long-term deals with stadia and promoters and artists and sports venues and all the rest of that. And we ended up really not being able to scale that business around the world. And if a business can't scale in America, then it's not going to do well in front of the Amazon leadership. And that was one that failed. So I think even some of the biggest businesses like Amazon could get this wrong, and can run into barriers. And you know, I think there's good lessons to learn in both the successes and the failures of those. That one being, make sure you have a really clear line of sight to supply in all of the areas that you think you're going to scale to, because unless you do, you may not have anything to sell.
James, thank you for that introduction. I love the way that you've actually chosen something not going well to introduce yourself, because that, I mean, I think as we go through, we're going to realize that was a valuable experience, but in fact lots of what you've worked on has been tremendously successful. And so I think the place that I'd love to start is you can take a bit of a step back, and it's just about innovation in general. Everybody wants to know at the moment about innovation. It seems to be something that is a way out of various crises, and deserves special attention at the moment. But what is it? I mean, what is it to you? Has your sort of thinking on innovation changed in any way over the past few months?
Look, I think, first of all, I think innovation is a fundamental for rapid growth. Innovation doesn't need to be specifically about a product, a widget that is somehow different to the other widgets that are in the marketplace. It can be broadly about your business model. It could be about your processes that are innovative. I think it's also a culture within a business, right? It's how you think. It's how these fast growth tech businesses think. It tends to have characteristics of rapid iteration, cross-functional teams working together, a real laser focus around a quite specifically defined customer problem. And look, for me, it's a fundamental to rapid growth. If you are not an innovator and a disruptor, you're not going to grow fast. You might grow, but you're not going to see this kind of rapid scaling that you see in businesses like whatever it might be, Airbnb, Uber, all the rest of them that are the kind of poster childs of this movement.
That's an excellent introduction, because some of the things that you've picked up on there are seen, I think, now as you say, it's the foundations of growth, and particularly growth in digital businesses. If we just sort of think about scaling innovation then across borders, and to sort of go, kind of back to the subject heading. You've given an example of Amazon, where that was going incredibly well, and then you do hit a major block in cracking America, that tricky problem. But what, from maybe some of your other experiences, scaling innovation across borders can be really challenging. So what are the challenges are there?
Well, I think we touched on supply. I think that's one category to think about. And there's I'm going to give kind of go through a few others. I think cultural tastes and customer preferences, and then standardization I want to talk about. So let's get into cultural taste first. And it's good to give an example, I think, to think about these. So I worked at eBay, and one of the challenges that eBay had when it came from America to Europe was just how to break these European markets. And of course, eBay's model had been this traditional auction-based model that had started as auction and actually became more of a direct sell model, but still a marketplace model. What they did was they thought that they could come over to Europe and just apply the same model as they had in the US, and it's working there. Why wouldn't it work in Europe? So they chose a couple of European countries, Holland being one of them, to start with. When they got over to Holland, they found that actually the way in which customers bought over there was not about a marketplace model, but rather was something that had grown out of the old newspaper model of classified advertising. And culturally in Holland, if you wanted to sell something, you placed an ad in a newspaper. And that had pivoted to becoming an online business, and a business called Marktplaats really was dominant in Holland. And then when you looked at how the process of placing a classified ad worked versus the very, very highly structured process of selling something on eBay, it was quite different, right? And it would take even eBay employees maybe five or 10 minutes to get their listing set up on eBay at the time, but yet they could do a classified ad in half that time, maybe a quarter of that time. Really, a couple of minutes was all it took. And eBay suddenly realized that there was this very simplified model that in lots of ways wasn't as beneficial to the customer because you didn't get the highest price in an auction mechanic and those sort of things. But the reason people liked it was that it was super simple. And they just misjudged this cultural prevailing way of doing things. And that was also the same of a number of countries in Europe. So eBay at that point had to pivot their strategy and ended up buying a number of these marketplace businesses, which is why Marktplaats in Holland is part of the eBay corporation, and Gumtree is part of eBay in the UK. So eBay decided to ride two horses there, and that's a very valid strategy. There was quite a visceral reaction from some of the Dutch press, who then started up additional rival businesses. But by that time, eBay had grown fast enough and got enough of a foothold in that country to be able to ride that out. So I guess cultural taste is one thing, and how customers think about buying. Another example that I have is from very directly from my own experience at eBay. So we had a program which was super profitable, and this is the same for all e-commerce businesses. If a customer leaves something in the basket or browses an object, or on eBay it's browse, watch, bid, any of those actions on an object, and then they don't purchase, then there's a whole follow-up series of emails and messages that goes to that customer. And we would recommend the object itself, but then also other similar objects that might be valid alternatives to the customer. So I was running sort of the eBay customer marketing group globally, and we'd run this program, and it was working really, really well. In the US, it was working. In the UK, it was working. In Southern Europe, it was working. In most of Northern Europe, it was working. But in Germany, it wasn't working. And my VP at the time just kept on beating me up, because Germany's a big market for eBay, and it's the biggest European market. And I was getting a lot of heat for it. Why isn't it working? And couldn't work it out. And so we did a lot of analysis and just started looking at all these metrics. And what we realized was that for German customers, they would come to the page and then they would leave again, and then they would come back and then they would leave again, and they would look at quite a lot of other pages, a lot more than any other country. And we started with that data, and then also with some market research, and just understand in a really granular way that a German customer likes to take their time and consider the alternatives and do a lot of comparison. They're very cautious buyers. That's probably why they make such good decisions on a regular basis. But they're very cautious. They're very methodical. Whereas the Brits just see something and just impulsively buy, get it, see it, buy it. The Americans the same. And we'd made this faulty assumption that customers around the world would react in the same way, so we could scale this program in the same way to wherever they were. And that proves not to be true. So I think another thing that you need to know, so there's some cultural things, and then there's a real closeness to the signals that customers give you. And if something isn't working in one country, dig into it, really understand why in a granular level. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was standardization. So I think there in some markets there's a really interesting opportunity that is different from one market to another, and others that it's completely the same. So how you configure your product to scale then becomes a really important decision. So Uber is the one that springs to mind for me, where you could say that mostly across the UK, the Uber offering is pretty similar. There's Uber XL, there's Uber X, and there are a few other options, but it's pretty homogenous. However, if you go to other countries, and Germany is a good example where regulation is really tough, the choices of options that they have are quite different. They have to connect to very different customer networks. They have fixed pricing constraints in certain places. But then they also have different offers. I suppose in London now you can get the Uber boat, the Uber Clipper, and that's a really interesting offer. In Nice you can get the helicopter from Nice to Cannes, which is quite nice.
Wow.
On Uber. So, there are different configurations that they have to have. Uber have done this really well in that they've set up a flexible product that is configurable and therefore can be deployed in any one country very, very easily and very rapidly without the need for development. And they're just flicking switches to turn on modular parts of their product in a really easy way. And that product configuration, the standardization of their product and the configurability of their product, together with really a kind of a rapid process for scaling, sort of getting to a country, agreeing a framework, signing up drivers and launching within 2 to 4 weeks each time, and having a launch team. That was key to their success, and that rapid growth got them so well established that even if there was some regulatory framework that started to sort of have a reaction against them, by the time it did, they had already got to really, really large scale, and then they had the levers of customer demand to use to say, hey, look, this is a great service, and we're proving it. Look at all these customers using us. So that rapid scaling and the ability to standardize your product and transplant it with a few configuration changes quickly is really important. So how you do that is really important. There are some businesses where it just won't be the same. It won't be the same marketplace in one country than it is in the other. I've just stepped out of Trainline, and Trainline UK is a liberalized market with lots of train suppliers, and so Trainline does incredibly well because it has this super convenient, handy app, and it consolidates all of the different train offerings into one app, and so you go to one place and you can buy your train ticket, and that's great. And that sort of aggregation mechanism is a thing where it really does well. To date in Europe, while Trainline has done enormously well because of its ease of use, that liberalization of the market, the competitiveness of supply hasn't yet happened. Although the great news for Trainline is it is happening, and that has the laws have been passed, but those markets haven't yet quite become competitive. So those are opportunities for Trainline to get in the future. But the level to which you standardize and the level to which you customize your product is a really important decision. So those things are incredibly important for all of the folks on the line to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for those stories. And a reminder there actually of what incredible businesses eBay, Uber are, and how much they have changed the way we perceive, well, transportation and and essentially commerce. To pick up on something that you said though, and you've mentioned it now a couple of times, you talked about, particularly with Uber, configuring the product and being able to do that. But what are the structures, the internal structures that are required, and the teams in order to actually function in this way?
Yeah, so you need to build a quite a nimble organization, and I'm a huge fan of, and I've seen it work really well in places like Amazon and Trainline, of cross-functional small teams. So Amazon used to call them two pizza teams. They're a two pizza team because You can feed the team with 2 pizzas. There's probably two very large pizzas, but maybe about 10 to 12 people. They're cross-functional teams because they usually have 4 or 5 developers, product manager, an analyst, and a couple of commercial folks, and maybe some specialists like someone from legal, or what would, depending on what the challenge is, a marketeer, and those teams then can really home in on a problem in a marketplace. They can become incredibly specialized around it, but they're autonomous enough with the development capability that they have to build solutions that are right for that for that market. Now, when you talk about standardization versus customization, you have to have some guiding structure above that, and a bigger architectural plan. So, you know, at Trainline, we built out a single global platform that is the sort of the backbone, if you like, of the core product. And then you can have teams that then attack a certain function or a certain customer problem, and build competitive advantage in a country. So I know our audience is fairly UK centric, so I'll use a UK example that we'll understand. We launched Split Tickets in the UK, and did it with exactly this type of team. Split Tickets is where instead of buying a ticket, say from London to Edinburgh, you buy that journey, but we'll give you multiple tickets. So London to York to Edinburgh, and it costs less as a result because of some quirks of the pricing of train tickets in the UK. So we could save customers money, but getting those things right and getting that innovation delivered quickly required that cross-functional team. And you know, this is where you know it's pretty common in tech. You have the team that's meeting in a stand-up every morning. They're trying to work without the burden of too many grand plans that they have to present back to the executive board. They're trying to work in a nimble way along lean startup principles. So if anyone's going to read a book, read that book.
I had noticed that. I thought that is a good one. Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
So Lean Startup by Eric Ries. And that's about just rapid iteration, getting something to market very quickly, even if it's a prototype, or frankly, even if it's design drawings, right? Put them in front of customers, ask them questions about it. Would they use it? Do they understand what you're thinking about building? And they will probably set you straight pretty quickly on some of your assumptions. And make your product better before you even start writing code. But then 2 weeks later, once you've built the skeleton of a prototype, go back again. And 2 weeks later, go back again with whatever you have. And just keep doing that. With Split Tickets, we had to iterate so many times to get this product really intuitive and super slick for customers, because it was complicated. If you try and build something and then do a big launch without that iterative approach, you will more than likely have some of your assumptions wrong, and will take a lot longer to get there. So yeah, so cross-functional teams, rapid iteration, those are the things that I would stress are incredibly important.
Thank you. And just to touch on that, the type of thing that you are describing, I mean, and it's reasonably known that is how digital businesses need to function. But some of the things you're describing, I think, are quite uncomfortable, and they run counter to the way products have been developed in certain organizations for a long time. And I'm thinking about perhaps some financial services products, or, you know, insurance, which are highly regulated environments. Do you think rapid iteration is possible in most sectors, or do you feel that there are some special cases where you can't?
I really do. I think it is, with obviously more guardrails in some sectors than others. I mean, take Monzo and the incredible success that Monzo has had. You know, Monzo is doing this, and it is driving massive innovation in the banking market. It has you can go and look at their roadmap. It has this transparent roadmap that they publish. It is continuously testing with customers, and that has allowed them, I think it's driven two things, right? It's driven innovation. It's also driven enormous amounts of loyalty amongst their customer base, because they're so transparent, they're so open about what they're trying to do, and customers give them a pass. If something is a bit not as intuitive as it could be because it's in beta and they're testing it, customers understand that because they know that they're going to, whatever the clunkiness will be fixed in the next iteration and it will get better. So, banking is a highly regulated industry. Of course, there are some things that you can't mess around with. You can't, you're not going to go and lose someone's money, but that doesn't mean you can't iterate fast within guardrails, and you should absolutely do that if you want to drive innovation quickly.
Thank you. And just, I want to take a pause for a second just to remind everybody to pop some questions in. We've had a couple come through. I'll turn to them in a minute. But before I do that, thinking about crisis mode, which globally we are in some form or another, and to different extents now in different territories, do you think that there are some major opportunities here for innovation and innovation across borders that are going to come out of this change in circumstances that we find ourselves in?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there are some dimensions of the crisis that are incredibly well suited to innovation across borders. We're doing this on Zoom. That means it doesn't matter where we are. So there's a thing that I'm certainly not the first to call out. But I think a thing that stands out to me is that when you're in a crisis mode, suddenly some of the red tape around decision making can fall away, and that can allow businesses, even large businesses, to get to innovation very quickly. And I'm going to give a non-private sector, a government sector example, which I think is great, and it's the homelessness action that was taken at the beginning of the crisis, where it became clear that as coronavirus was spreading, there would be the general population would be staying at home, but there will be some people who didn't have a home and would be on the streets sleeping rough. And so I'm not quite sure exactly what the number was, but I think it was something like 80,000 rough sleepers across the UK. An instruction was given to find them a place to stay by the weekend, and it was given on a Wednesday. And broadly, by the time it got to that weekend, those people were housed in hotels that were empty and various places that could accommodate them. And so I think one of the things that a crisis, and that is a problem that governments of all colours have been battling with for years, and have not really ever found a solution to. Now, I don't think this is the solution. It's only a solution once those people are permanently integrated back into society and have a place to stay for the long term. But it certainly is illustrative of how decision making in the face of a crisis can drive very, very rapid action. And often the only thing that's in the way of getting stuff done is ourselves, right? It's just decisions. And I think if you're able to think in that way, I also I think it was one of the leaders at GE I heard interviewed who'd said they'd pivoted one of their businesses to making respirators, and it didn't make respirators. It makes something completely different. I don't know, aircraft engines, whatever it made. They pivoted in a very small number of weeks using the drawings that they'd got from I think it was a competitor actually who'd shared those, but they pivoted this business and started making respirators. And those things are amazing. And I think that the leader had said, right, we're no longer, we need to learn from this. We're no longer going to work at normal speed. We're going to work at respirator speed. And that is that's about people being super focused on a goal and making decisions quickly because they can, and they don't need to prevaricate. They don't need all the politics and umming and ahhing, and they can actually make decisions quickly.
Absolutely, and incredibly powerful. And I hope that that's something that companies hold on to, that understanding that they can just do it.
Yeah.
Had a couple of questions come through, so I'm going to turn to them now, and then there may be a few more from me, because we've covered a lot of ground, lots of interesting things to pick up on. A question's come through, which I think is really good, because how would you recommend small players or small business owners get involved with the innovation drive? And, you know, sometimes constraints due to lack of funding or due to, you know, lack of resources can make that really tough. So do you have any particular advice for them?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it can make it tough if you think, well, we're small, so we can't innovate and we don't have the resources. But on the flip side, I think it can, a lot of things are in your favor, right? So small businesses make great decisions quickly, and they can pivot very quickly. Their founders are very close to, well, all of the company, so they can see what's working, what isn't. I think, I think if you look across the landscape of where innovation happens, it typically happens first in small businesses. Sometimes the scaling is harder and requires resources and investment, but certainly innovation can happen. So I think a lot of it's about an attitude to taking things, and obviously a risk. Maybe a larger business can ride out a risky strategy, but larger businesses are much less likely to take risks because they've kind of already got there, and they're sitting on their fat kind of wad of cash, and they don't want to jeopardize that. But I think it's imperative for smaller businesses to take some risks in a controlled way, to run lots of experiments, see which ones work, and be bold. So I don't know what sector that small business is in, but I would really recommend embracing it as a method for growing fast.
Thank you. And I think going back to that, the culture of experimentation, and that, I think that sounds like that is at the core of having that mindset, understanding what experimentation is, and just being really comfortable with that is critical.
Yeah. I mean, split your proposition into an A and a B, and test one versus the other. You might not have huge volumes of customers to test against, but particularly if you have some strong hypotheses that are quite different from the prevailing norm, I'm sure you'll see a difference in response. Sometimes even with 5 or 6 observations, it becomes pretty clear what customers think of this thing. Either they love it or they really don't. And learn from that, then iterate again. Think about what your next set of hypotheses are that you want to test. Try and make them, with smaller audiences, try and make them sufficiently different from one to the other. You're not going to, if you have small volumes, you're not going to detect a 0.01% difference in conversion rate, which matters for Amazon, but probably doesn't at small scale. But if you can test something that's really quite different, then do. The other thing I would say is, think about, again, it's lean startup kind of 101. Really think about stripping back the things that you test, right? Don't invest in building a mega product before you test it, because that will suck up so much resources and cost way more in the long term. Think about your minimum viable product, test your prototypes, test all of those things with customers before you start writing a whole load of code, or building, committing capital to building whatever you have to do, manufacturing. Just think about how you can test from product market fit at small scale without having to build all of the product. See what you can do. What is your minimum stripped back version that will test the A versus B hypotheses?
That's excellent. Thank you. Really, really good advice there. Another question. This one is from Stephen, and it's a bit of a tricky one because risk management is inbuilt within business decision making, which is often the cause for delay, I think, in launching new products and innovating. But it's really, really important, and it's there for a reason. So do you have a view on how this dynamic can be managed?
Yeah, I mean, there's grades of risk, right? And risk management is important. I think, though, that you, as business leaders, really need to own some of those risks and not be completely averse to taking any risk, because not innovating and going slowly, growing slowly, and or not at all, having your offering go stale is a risk in itself, because the risk of not taking action is that someone else in your market will disrupt, and you'll end up with a rapidly shrinking business that you haven't you haven't innovated upon. I mean, a classic example of businesses like Nokia, where their mobile phones business was the number one, got completely ruined by the innovators that just ran around them in Apple and some Android that just completely ran around them. So if you don't, and that business went from being, I think it was 100 billion valuation to something like a 300 million, and so that's pretty tough thing in 10 years. And that is a business that was averse to risk, didn't want to innovate, felt that it was doing really quite well, thank you, look at the valuation, we're amazing, and found that it got disrupted and rapidly fell apart, and ended up being sold. I think they were the first sold to Microsoft for the Microsoft phone operating system, and then they were sold by Microsoft to I'm not sure who again, and the valuation went from huge to relatively small, and that was a story about being averse to risk and not thinking about how to make this product better, so it didn't appeal to the customers now, but it appeals to the customers of 5 years' time.
Thank you. We've got time for one last question, and this is from Danny, and it's really pertinent because as most organizations still work from home, do you have any thoughts on how they can ensure that innovation doesn't stall and that momentum is maintained?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more difficult, right? Because there is a magic in a cross-functional team all sitting together and doing their daily stand-ups. That said, it doesn't mean it can't happen. So one of the things I think that can happen from working from home, which is a huge benefit, is that probably people have a bit more time for thinking and doing, rather than, and hopefully doing less of meetings, constant meetings, because we all happen to be there in the same place, so we're just going to sit in a meeting. So that's one thing. Look, there are some of the ways in which the tools for innovation are now going online. So I don't know, I did a workshop yesterday. We used Miro, which is a sort of virtual whiteboard that you can share via Zoom. Lots of people can put post-it notes. We did a brainstorm with that. We grouped all these post-it notes into priorities, and using that tool, we did what we would do in a normal product discovery session, except we normally do that face to face. So you have to be resourceful. It's not perfect doing it on Zoom, but it certainly can happen. And I guess the other thing to say is that maybe the businesses that do this while we're all in lockdown will get 6 months ahead of the ones who kind of just switched off while we were. And a number of businesses have switched off, and everything's been too hard for them. And others then get 6 months advantage of development of their proposition that puts them 6 months ahead of the game.
Excellent. James, I'm really sad that we have to end it there because there's definitely legs to this discussion. Thank you so much for your practical advice. I feel there's some really practical lessons for there, for people there. So I think that's definitely given food for thought. Thank you for joining us.
Great, thank you.
I'm really excited to see what you do next as well. We'll all look out for that. So good luck with your future ventures.
Thank you very much. Cheers.